What happens in Beijing this week could reshape the entire global order. On May 13th, 2026, Air Force One touched down in Beijing. 300 Chinese children waved American and Chinese flags. A red carpet was rolled out, and the most powerful man in the world stepped off that plane for the first time in nearly a decade to face his greatest rival on the world stage. Donald Trump is in China. And the world is watching. This is not just a diplomatic visit. This is a high-stakes chess match between the two most powerful nations on Earth. And every move made in that room over the next 48 hours will have consequences for your life, your economy, and the future of the entire planet. I'm going to break this down for you completely. No spin, no fluff, pure geopolitical analysis. But before we dive in, if this kind of deep dive content is what you're looking for, go ahead and smash that like button right now. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. We drop geopolitical analysis like this every week. Let's get into it. Context. Why this summit is unlike anything we've seen. To understand why this summit is so significant, you need to understand what led up to it. The last time an American president set foot in China was November 2017, Trump's first presidency. That was almost 9 years ago. 9 years of escalating tensions, trade wars, a global pandemic, and now a war in the Middle East that has completely rewritten the rules of engagement between Washington and Beijing. Trump and Xi Jinping had their first face-to-face meeting of this second term at the APEC summit in Busan, South Korea on October 30th, 2025. At that meeting, they agreed to a one-year pause in their trade war, and Trump announced he would visit Beijing in April 2026. But then everything changed. The Iran war broke out. The U.S. attacked Iran on February 28th, 2026. The Beijing trip was delayed. And now here we are, May 2026, and Trump is finally in China. But the entire context of this visit has shifted dramatically. What was supposed to be a trade summit has now become a multi-front geopolitical negotiation covering trade, Taiwan, Iran, artificial intelligence, rare earth minerals, and the future architecture of global power. This is the most consequential U.S.-China summit in a generation. The trade war. Where do we stand? Let's start with the issue Trump himself says is his number one priority: trade. The U.S.-China trade relationship has been one of the most turbulent economic stories of the past decade. When Trump returned to the White House in January 2025, he came back with tariffs as his primary weapon, and he used them aggressively. At the peak of the trade war, tariffs on some Chinese goods climbed above 100%. Both sides escalated. China retaliated with its own tariffs. And for a while, it looked like the world's two largest economies were in full-blown economic warfare. But here's what changed. The Supreme Court of the United States struck down Trump's global reciprocal tariffs as unconstitutional in February 2026. That changed the leverage dynamic significantly. Then came the South Korea deal in October 2025, a one-year tariff truce where China agreed to buy more American agricultural products, including soybeans, and Washington rolled back some tariffs. So what's on the table now in Beijing? Extending that truce and potentially expanding it. Trump arrived in Beijing with a delegation of over a dozen top American CEOs. We're talking about Elon Musk of Tesla, Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, who actually boarded Air Force One in Alaska during a stopover, Tim Cook of Apple, Larry Fink of BlackRock, and the CEOs of Boeing and Citigroup. Think about what that signals. This is not just diplomacy. This is business. Trump wants to open the Chinese market to American companies. In fact, before boarding the plane, Trump posted on Truth Social, and I'm paraphrasing here, that he would ask President Xi to open up China so that these brilliant people can work their magic and bring China to an even higher level. That's classic Trump, flattery mixed with demand. For China's side, Beijing wants predictability. They want certainty for the remainder of Trump's term through January 2029 so they can plan their own economic policies. As analyst Feng Chucheng put it, Beijing needs to be able to plan its own economic policies, and that requires knowing what the tariff environment will look like for the next 3 years. A limited trade agreement is the most likely outcome. Think tariff pauses, Chinese purchase commitments for American goods, and rare earth arrangements. By the way, if you're finding this analysis valuable, drop a comment below telling me what you think the biggest outcome of this summit will be. Is it trade, Taiwan, Iran? I read every single comment. Let me know. Now, let's talk about the issue that has everyone on edge, Taiwan. Taiwan, the powder keg. Taiwan is without question the most dangerous topic on the summit agenda. Here's the background you need. Taiwan, officially the Republic of China, is a self-governing democracy of 23 million people. Beijing considers it a rogue province that must eventually be reunified with the mainland. The United States, under the Taiwan Relations Act of 1979, is committed to providing Taiwan with the means to defend itself. For decades, American policy has been carefully managed around this tension. The U.S. maintains strategic ambiguity, meaning it doesn't explicitly say it will or won't go to war to defend Taiwan. But now, something unprecedented is happening. Trump has put U.S. arms sales to Taiwan on the summit agenda. Let that sink in. The U.S. Congress approved a $14 billion arms package for Taiwan earlier this year. That deal still requires Trump's personal approval. And instead of keeping that quiet, Trump has effectively used it as a bargaining chip in Beijing. China's top diplomat Wang Yi described Taiwan as, quote, the biggest point of risk in the bilateral relationship, and urged Washington to keep its promise and make the right choices to open up new space for China-U.S. cooperation. What does that mean in plain language? Beijing wants Trump to cancel or water down that arms deal. And here's where it gets really serious. The ongoing Iran war has actually given China more leverage on Taiwan. Why? Because the United States has diverted significant military resources, ships, air assets, attention toward the Middle East. That means fewer assets are positioned near Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea. Some analysts are saying this reduces the credibility of America's deterrence posture in the Indo-Pacific. William Yang, an analyst at the Crisis Group, told Al Jazeera that she will use these meetings to influence and potentially convince Trump to agree to scale back, if not completely suspend, sales to Taiwan. If Trump makes that concession, he would be breaking a policy that dates back to Ronald Reagan. It would be a massive strategic blow to Taiwan, whose president, William Lai Ching-te, is already fighting political battles at home over defense spending. And for the rest of the Indo-Pacific, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Singapore, this sends a chilling message. The American security umbrella might be negotiable. Professor Salvador Santino Reguilme of Leiden University put it best when he said, "In great power politics, small words often carry large consequences, especially for those whose survival depends on the credibility of others." The Iran war, the shadow over everything. Now let's talk about the issue that delayed this summit by 6 weeks, and that has fundamentally altered the strategic balance going into these talks. Iran. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched military strikes against Iran. What was supposed to be a short, decisive operation, the Trump administration predicted 4 to 6 weeks, has now dragged on for months. And it has created a massive geopolitical problem for Washington. Here's why China matters so much in the Iran context. China buys more than 80% of Iran's exported crude oil. Iran is one of China's key energy partners. China has massive economic leverage over Tehran. The United States desperately wants China to use that leverage to pressure Iran to come back to the negotiating table and agree to a settlement and to help reopen and secure the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most important waterways on Earth. About 20% of the world's oil passes through it. Iran has threatened to close it. And if that happens, global oil prices spike, shipping becomes impossible, and economies around the world feel the pain immediately. Trump said before departing Washington that he would have a long talk with Xi about Iran. But he also tried to downplay it, saying he doesn't think Washington needs China's help, which most analysts read as posturing. The reality is, China has genuine leverage here, and Beijing knows it. Here's the nuance, though. Iran is actually one of the few areas where U.S. and Chinese interests potentially overlap. China gets about 50% of its crude oil imports from the Middle East. Disruptions in the Gulf hit China hard, too. Commercial shipping is vulnerable. Energy security is a shared concern. Dan Grazier of the Stimson Center said he has no doubt that Trump is going to at least try to enlist Xi Jinping to assert some pressure for the Iranians to come back to the table. But Beijing is also impatient. China's foreign minister recently urged Pakistan to step up mediation efforts between Iran and the United States. Beijing wants this war to end, but on terms that don't make China look like it caved to American pressure. And then there's the U.S. sanctions angle. Over the past month, the U.S. has launched several rounds of sanctions targeting Chinese firms, including Chinese oil refineries accused of buying Iranian crude. Beijing responded with a prohibition order directing Chinese firms to ignore those sanctions. This is the high wire act Trump and Xi are navigating. Artificial intelligence and tech competition. Let's talk tech, because AI and technology competition may be the longest game being played here. The United States has been systematically trying to cut China off from advanced semiconductor technology. Export controls, NVIDIA restrictions, blacklists. The goal has been to slow China's ability to develop its own advanced AI capabilities. China's response has been to accelerate domestic investment, develop homegrown chips, and leverage its rare earth dominance as a countermeasure. And rare earths, let's be clear, are not a minor issue. Rare earth minerals and the magnets made from them are essential for electric vehicles, fighter jets, smartphones, wind turbines, and almost every piece of modern technology you can think of. China controls approximately 60% of global rare earth production and up to 90% of global processing capacity. When tensions escalated earlier this year, China suspended exports of a wide range of rare earth minerals and magnets. The result? Upended supply chains across Europe, Japan, South Korea, and the United States. Automakers were hit hard. Defense contractors were scrambling. NVIDIA's Jensen Huang being on Air Force One is no coincidence. The AI chip giant wants to sell its most advanced chips to China. And those sales are currently restricted by U.S. export controls. A deal that loosens those restrictions could be worth billions to NVIDIA and give Trump a visible economic win to bring home. But any loosening of chip export controls carries strategic risk. You're essentially helping your primary strategic competitor close the AI gap. This is the central dilemma of U.S.-China tech competition: economic interdependence versus strategic competition. What the rest of the world is watching for, let me zoom out now. Because Beijing this week is not just about Washington and Beijing. The entire world is watching. And every country has something at stake. Europe is watching the tariff outcomes. If Chinese tariffs drop significantly, the business incentive to move manufacturing from China to Southeast Asia or back to the West weakens. Brussels and Tokyo are quietly hoping the summit doesn't go too smoothly. Southeast Asia, Singapore, Vietnam, Thailand is watching the Strait of Hormuz angle. These nations are heavily dependent on Gulf oil. Energy prices are already elevated. Any joint U.S.-China agreement to stabilize the strait could be an economic lifeline. Taiwan is watching every word for signals that Washington is quietly trading its security for a trade deal. Russia is in the background. Vladimir Putin is expected to visit Beijing just days after Trump leaves. The message is unmistakable. China is the hub of a new multipolar diplomatic calendar. And Africa, the Middle East, the Global South, They're watching to see whether the world's two dominant powers can stabilize the global order, or whether this summit marks the beginning of a formal division of the world into two competing spheres of influence. Professor Redraw of Leiden University describes it this way: the deeper conflict concerns hierarchy, legitimacy, and the future architecture of global order. Trade is just the language. The real question is, who leads the world in the 21st century? My geopolitical analysis, what will actually happen? Okay, let's get real. What do I actually think comes out of this summit? First, expect a trade announcement. Trump needs a win he can sell politically. Expect some version of Chinese commitment to buy X billion dollars of American goods, a tariff freeze extension, and possibly some movement on rare earth exports. This is the easy win. Second, on Taiwan, expect carefully worded ambiguity. Trump will not publicly cancel the arms deal in Beijing. That would be too politically costly at home. But behind closed doors? I would not be surprised if quiet assurances are given that slow walk the process. Watch what doesn't happen in the weeks after the summit. If that $14 billion arms deal disappears into bureaucratic limbo, you'll know why. Third, on Iran, expect a joint statement that says both sides support peace and diplomatic resolution without China explicitly committing to pressure Tehran. China gets to look like a peacemaker without actually doing anything binding. Fourth, on AI and chips, expect some carve-outs or licensing frameworks to allow limited NVIDIA sales to China. This benefits both sides economically and gives Trump a business community victory. Fifth, and most importantly, expect this summit to be presented as a massive success by both sides. Xi needs to show his people that China is now America's equal. Trump needs to show his base that he made incredible deals. Both men are showmen. Both men will declare victory. The Council on Foreign Relations described this summit accurately before it even started. It's an effort to stabilize the relationship, not resolve it. The fundamental contradictions between Washington and Beijing are not going away. This is crisis management at the highest levels. So let me leave you with this thought. We are living through one of the most consequential periods in modern geopolitical history. The United States and China are locked in what historians may one day call the Second Cold War. But unlike the First Cold War with the Soviet Union, these two rivals are deeply economically intertwined. They need each other, they fear each other, they compete with each other, and they can't afford to go to war with each other. That paradox, that tension, is what makes the Trump-Xi summit in Beijing so fascinating, so dangerous, and so important. The decisions made in those meetings on Thursday and Friday will echo for years. For the American economy, for the global order, for Taiwan, for Iran, for the price of everything you buy, and I will be here. I'm breaking it all down for you. If you made it this far into this video, I want to say thank you. Seriously, you are exactly the kind of engaged, curious viewer that this channel exists for. Please hit that like button. It helps this analysis reach more people who need to understand what's really happening in the world. Subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the follow-up video when the summit results come out. And drop a comment below. What do you think Trump and Xi will actually agree on? And what do you think they're hiding? I want to hear your take. This has been your geopolitical deep dive. I'll see you in the next one.